Okay guys, time to put your tinnies on. We're going full schizo with this one. I think it's a fair statement to say that Chainsaw Man's Part 2 has been kind of all over the place. At times we focus on our new protagonist, the illustrious Asa Mitaka, and her very own femme Tyler Durden. Or we switch back to old reliable Denji and his love quest for some booty clapping. Well, it seems like that mission's about to be completed as our Part 1 hero is currently getting sexually assaulted at the time of recording this video. Oh god, it's all going downhill from here. But enough about the present, let's take a look at the future. You see, a few days ago I made a contract with the Future Devil, and in exchange for giving him my sanity, he's allowed me to see some parts of the future for Chainsaw Man's Part 2 ending. Keyword some. But in all seriousness, today's video will focus on analyzing Fujimoto's older one-shot, Nayuta of the Prophecy. A peculiar tale with eye-opening similarities that I believe may have some role in the ending of Chainsaw Man's Part 2. Or if there's a Part 3, or maybe if we start reaching levels of JoJoisms. Regardless, there's a lot to inspect. The literature of interest will be Tatsuki Fujimoto's omnibus collection of one-shots, literally titled Before Chainsaw Man. Stellar marketing. It's within this particular collection series of 22-26 that we find 4 distinct stories. But we're only going to be paying attention to one of the 4, Nayuta of the Prophecy. One thing I adore about this collection is that after every single one-shot, Fujimoto leaves a line detailing his thoughts on why this was created or any other feelings he couldn't really express. The ending of the Nayuta one-shot says this: Jump SQ editorial told me that Tatsuki Fujimoto can't write unique characters, so I wrote this to prove them wrong. Nayuta is still a favorite character of mine. Now between you and me, those are some fighting words. It would drive me up a wall and further emblazon my creative juices to create something to prove them wrong. From what I researched, is that this one-shot was released in 2015, putting it squarely before Chainsaw Man's Parts 1 and 2. Let me present to you my line of reasoning. As a writer, there have been times where I've written a short story and realized I've made an especially wonderful character, so I create a world that revolves around that character to live in. I think Fujimoto created Chainsaw Man for the sole purpose of giving Nayuta a world to live in, Nayuta being both herself and Makima. Characters don't have similar names and appearances for no reasons. A writer has a purpose. So if we pay more attention to the one-shot's ending, we might find some context clues on how the story might end, or at least the extent of Nayuta's and Denji's relationship. But for this to occur, we need to cover Makima. Makima is cold and calculating, obsessive and deranged. Not only did she groom a 16-year-old, but also holds a toxic messiah complex of ridding the world's evils. To achieve this, she sees Puchita as her way of erasing evil, therefore turning her into a superfan of Chainsaw Man. Before she's able to enact her world-changing plans, she is defeated by Denji and subsequently eaten, allowing for the revival of the Control Devil into a human form, Nayuta the Blank Canvas. It's after several chapters into Chainsaw Man's Part 2 that we finally see Nayuta again, seeing as how she's in the hands of Denji as a caretaker, oh god. Chapter 119 is an event, as we finally see Nayuta's personality as some bratty orc toddler. She finally develops her sense of self as she's essentially, metaphorically, default dancing on one of her sisters who she was able to constrain. Nayuta is possessive but also cautious of the dangers that are starting to come out from the shadows. This haughty ADHD-riddled child is the perfected version, or at least the success story of what we imagine Nayuta from the Prophecy one-shot will turn into after some time. The Nayuta one-shot's world is not as bizarre as Chainsaw Man's, as mages and demons exist. There's a prophecy that causes alarm and sets the stage for Nayuta and Kenji, her older brother. See how it might sound like Denji? Oh, parallels! Let's get back to the main point. There's a prophecy that causes alarm and sets the stage for Nayuta and Kenji's ostracization from society. The prophecy goes like this. A mage will be born with horns that pierce the mother's womb. They shall lack a human heart. They shall be cruel, speak unintelligibly, and one day they shall destroy the world. Prophecy Nayuta fits these categories on a very surface level analysis, which is exactly the way in which the people from this world all see her as. The mage will be born with horns is a direct observation of Nayuta's devil-like physical description. That pierce the mother's womb, I believe, is more of a reference towards the literal horns that pierce through her mother's womb, the physical act of popping out of someone like some sort of baby xenomorph. They shall lack a human heart is a line in the prophecy that is proven by Nayuta's explicit disregard for life. Now, in many ways, we don't really know Nayuta's physical composition and what organs she possesses, or rather, it's just that she has no empathy for those around her. As we can tell, she has very little sympathy for those not in her immediate circle. They shall be cruel is already a point seen with animal abuse. Speak unintelligibly is also quite literal. As we realize that Nayuta cannot speak in standard language, she can only speak through violent phrases, therefore meaning that yes, she is unintelligible. Imagine if someone kept trying to communicate to you in karate moves. All in all, the prophecy is literal with Nayuta's character. Kenji is the older brother of Nayuta and has been protecting her ever since she was born and since her father was murdered. In a climactic ending, Nayuta, seeing as how her brother was assaulted all because of her existence, decides to punish the world and follow through on destroying it. In the end, Nayuta is stopped by her own brother, who decides to bonk her on the head because she had gone too far with her abilities. The story ends with a bittersweet taste where the two siblings have moved away from their town and live on their own, surviving off of each other's company. Now that I've given you some sort of summary of Nayuta of the Prophecy, we can take a look at the comparisons between the one-shot and Chainsaw Man. For our comparisons of part 1, we mainly take a look at CSM's Nayuta and by extension, Makima's involvement. A mage will be born with horns that pierce the mother's womb. In the one-shot, we know that Nayuta's mother died while giving birth, the very act of an equivalent exchange, a life for a life. We also know that when devils die, they're reborn with a different appearance and a complete memory wipe. As we know from the conversation between Power and Denji in the last volume of part 1, the mage with horns can simply be referring to the stereotypical association we have with devils and horns. The devil Nayuta was essentially born from Makima, as they're both the control devil. Now let's take a focus on the mother's womb, as there's one character in particular within CSM that has a focus on the womb, Makima. When utilizing her powers in part 1, the chains that are used to control her opponents come from her pelvis, one could argue the womb. The next vessel of the control devil. This purposeful lower area that the chains sprout from is an intentional artistic choice made by Fujimoto, as a mother is strict, overbearing who rears in her children, the masses, the populace of the world. They shall lack a human heart. This particular point of the prophecy is the weakest and shows us that prophecy as a whole is quite shaky. We can relate this attribute to Makima's character. Earlier I stated that to lack a human heart can mean in both literal and metaphorical sense. In the literal sense, we don't know if the physiology of Makima or really any other four horsemen possesses a heart. I think this point is really more focused on the complete lack of empathy that Makima has and Nayuta at first starts off with. Makima sees herself as some sort of egalitarian ruler who will use the powers of Chainsaw Man to rid the world of the devils that humans fear the most, but our main topic is Nayuta, and this one is more on the nose with the example. We know that the Control Devil could never really connect with others and instead relied on its abilities to force companionship, but as Puchita says, the way to resolve this is by giving the Control Devil lots of hugs. While the prophecy is true to an extent, I think Denji subverts the Control Devil's lack of a human heart through Nayuta. Nayuta at the end of Chainsaw Man Part 1 reminds me of the empty vessel. It's only after Denji pours human love into the equation that we see Nayuta change for the better from her more aloof version when she first appeared. The interesting point here is that both the prophecy in the one-shot and in Chainsaw Man, Nayuta never actually lacked a human heart, but was rather terrible at explaining herself. Now let's look at the example from the one-shot. Throughout the one-shot, Nayuta consistently threw dead animals at Kenji for what we believed was a crude reason. From an outsider's perspective, we thought that she was just weird and gross, but it's when we reach the climax, as Nayuta is in the process of destroying the world, that we find out that the reason she threw dead animals at Kenji is because she wanted him to eat. Nayuta's very existence put fear in the hearts of people so that they would take it out on Kenji, who could never find a job because the employers didn't want someone who was associated with the demon child. Therefore, they lacked money, and unfortunately only one of them could have a decent meal from time to time. Nayuta knew this and continued to throw dead animals at her brother so that he could have some sort of meal to get him through the day. She always had a human heart, or rather empathy, but was unable to explicitly say it because of the language barrier. Nayuta in CSM is of the similar vein. It's clear that in the latest chapters of Part 2 that she deeply cares about Denji and his mental state with being replaced as Chainsaw Man by the religious fanatics who are trying to starve him of attention. They shall be cruel, speak unintelligibly. This part of the prophecy is also based on one's own perception. In the one-shot, Nayuta is perceived to be cruel due to her killing of livestock, but we know this isn't true because she only did it to feed her brother. However, an argument can be made that it is cruel to mass murder innocent livestock when you could have killed only one. Nayuta in CSM follows a similar path, where in Part 2 she is shown using her Control Devil powers only for her own pleasure, where as a student she commands her classmates to give them her food. I'm pretty sure if you found out your child had their food stolen from another classmate, you'd be pretty mad. Another example is when she used her ability to control Asa's body and make her into some personal dog. The speak unintelligibly portion of the prophecy is another quality of the Nayutas that is true to a degree, but later corrected. Nayuta in the one-shot tries her best to learn languages, and towards the end is able to communicate through writing quite successfully. Nayuta in CSM is of the same vein, as at the end of part 1, Nayuta could really only speak about 3 words, making communication quite limited. It's after some time in part 2 that she's now fully able to speak and communicate with Denji and others. The purpose of this video led me to a revelation. In the one-shot, Nayuta and the prophecy weren't triggered by her birth, but rather humanity's own fears. It was self-fulfilling. It's because of how they ostracized the siblings that caused Kenji's life to become limited in opportunities and Nayuta to eventually crack. See, the only reason I bring this up is that in part 2, there's this concept known as the Nostradamus prophecy that tells that the great king of terror will arrive, as a wave of more devils begin to arrive on Earth. I think this prophecy is a load of BS. In the one-shot, Nayuta was a mage with unparalleled power. In CSM, I would say that the control devil is one of the most broken devils with the strongest abilities. Nayuta only needs to say the words and commands any devil, regardless of stature, to bend the knee. It's clear that she will play a major role in the climactic ending of CSM, as Fami must starve someone to have control and Yoru must make the person believe they're lower than her to control. Nayuta seemingly had no problem restraining one of her sisters. That's why I think that this prophecy we've been introduced to in CSM may also be another subversion. True, a great king of terror may arrive, which can indicate Chainsaw Man or an even more dangerous devil like Death to arrive, but that doesn't mean that it'll cause the end of the world. Devils fear the Chainsaw Devil as his powers can erase them. Maybe it's indicating the arrival of Black Chainsaw Man once again. We're probably going to be looking at an eclipse scene reminiscent of Berserk as the devils come to storm the world, but that has little foundation for now. Who knows, the Great King of Terror arriving could very well be Chainsaw Man coming to the defense of humanity against the onslaught of devils coming from hell. But I know one thing for certain. Nayuta has an important role in the foreseeable future, and conflicts of CSM, and with this so-called world-ending prophecy, may just be another red herring for us readers set by Fujimoto. What do you guys think about these similarities between the one-shot and the manga series CSM? It is a possibility that the Nostradamus theory could also just be a big lie, or we might just have a different interpretation of what's going to happen. Regardless, I'd love to hear your thoughts on my take. I hope you liked this shorter video. Seeing as how I got off another larger Chainsaw Man video, I'm going to start making more shorter videos and topics that have been gnawing at me from the back. Anyway, if this is your first time here, then subscribe. I'd love to have you. If you're a subscriber, then leave a like on the video. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you all have a great day. Take care.